special 49ers offseason edition podcast episode. I'm here with Jamal from 49ers Talk with Jasper and Jamal. Jamal, how are you doing today, man?
I am well, sir. I'm doing very well. Just a small little minor correction. The show is Niner Talk with
Niner
Jasper
Talk.
and Jamal. I know it's so easy to say 49er Talk. Totally understand that. But our little side thing is we are Niner Talk with the number 9. So that's it. But yeah, I'm doing really well. I'm so grateful and blessed to be able to come on with you and talk some football. I appreciate you bringing me on. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Yeah, definitely. And it's always a pleasure to talk Niners. So let's get straight to it. We'll quickly talk about the season before getting into the off-season part. And I just wanted to ask you, a lot of the talk postseason was, do you consider the season a success or not because of how the 49ers implemented their two quarterback plan? So I wanted to ask you, do you consider this season a success?
You know what? I do. I've been asked this question a couple times since the season has ended. I went on with Jesse from Last Second Sports. He asked me the same question as well too, and my answer has kind of been the same, but I guess my outcome of what I've said was a successful season has shifted a little bit. So I'd say yes, the season was a success, but the reason I say yes is due to it's got multiple sides to it. I think at the start of the season, we were told, that this was a Super Bowl contending roster and this was a Super Bowl contending team. And with that being said, I came into the season thinking this team could go to the Super Bowl. Obviously, looking back on it now, being in the NFC Championship game and not pulling out the W to get to the Super Bowl, we can say yes or no. But I'd rather be in an NFC Championship game and a chance to go to the Super Bowl than not. And with that being said, I think it's hard to say yes, it's successful, or no, it's not successful. But what I would say is I'll give reasons why I believe it was successful. And that starts with the way the season started. We were told that it was going to be a Super Bowl contending team, but the way the season started through the first half of the season, it wasn't looking like that. Starting out 2-0 in those two Lions and Eagles game, there were some cause for concerns. Also, it looked like the offense was also in somewhat of a rhythm as well too. We were able to score 30 plus points in week 1, whereas week 2 versus the Eagles, it was more of a hard fought effort in that one. But you get to halfway through the season, we're sitting at 3-5, and it didn't look good. There was concerns with the defense. The offense wasn't able to execute and stay on the field, especially on third down. I think our third down efficiency was in like the low 30s at that point in time, like 30% conversion rate, very choppy through that stretch. We had lost to the Colts in that game. There were a lot of our own miscues as well. We were able to move up and down the field on certain drives to start the game, to start the second half, and then it would sputter out. So a lot of ups and downs through the first half of the season. But as you get throughout the rest of the course of the season, the second half, that toughness of the early struggles, I think also led to us being mentally tough and playing essentially playoff football from before the playoffs started. Obviously, Trey Lance comes in, plays a couple games this season. Jimmy Garoppolo also gets hurt. So I think Trey played 2.5 games. I actually got to be at the Seahawks game where Trey came in the second half. I was at that game. But like I said, it's twofold. Trey starts a game in week 17. That's, against the Cardinals, the Texans. That's a playoff game at that point. If we lost that game, we probably wouldn't have been in the playoffs. And then we get week 18. We're playing the Rams, and we have to win that one also to go to the playoffs. And we're able to come back and, punch our ticket to the playoffs. But I say that just to say the mental toughness of a 3-5 start. A lot of people talking about Jimmy Garoppolo's job. Should it go to Trey Lance? Kyle Shanahan has come out and mentioned how close it was that he almost put Trey Lance in, to start the rest of the season. Trey Lance ends up getting a little hurt. So we they go back to Jimmy Garoppolo, and we go on a little mini run there and get our season turned around. I believe it was week 8. We played the Rams. We come out with a 31-10, I believe it was 31-10 victory.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think that was, whether you agree or not, I think you could argue that week was possibly our most complete offensive performance. And I think that shifted a lot of expectations from that point going forward in terms of 49ers fan base. It seems the team was always close. They were always, a close-knit offense. But if I want to switch just from there, so the 3-5 start to, I think it was 9 and
I think it's 10
7
and
2.
7 and 2, and then we
over
win
the last
two
9.
playoffs.
Right, exactly. And so I'd say, looking at that, the turnaround, but you have to also include, we got to see Ambry Thomas. We got to see his development. We started off the season with Dre Kirkpatrick came in early. Obviously, Jason Verrett gets hurt week 1. We had Josh Norman, who played a crucial stretch for us. A lot of fans can say whether they, like him or not, or hope he doesn't come back. I don't expect he'll be back, but he still did play a crucial stretch for us for the better part of this season, I would say. So having Ambry Thomas come in and play, I think 7 games total, and getting to see his development process start, and looking back now, it's promising, right? He's shown the ability to, I don't want to say be a ball hawk, but he can make plays on the ball. I think that his athleticism is legit. I think he runs a legit high 4 or low 4.4, possibly 4.3. I got to see some of that athleticism. I think he's going to only continue to improve from a schematic standpoint as well too. But I've always said this from the beginning: the athleticism of this kid deserves to be on the field. Will he continue to improve schematically? I think he will. But I'm very encouraged by what I saw in the limited amount of playing time, in the essentially 1/3 of a playing season that he played. I'm encouraged by what I saw from him. We got to see Elijah Mitchell as well. Had he not got hurt, he probably would have had a 1,000-yard season. Obviously, we got to see him because Mostert gets hurt as well too, which allowed these guys opportunities as well. So you wish Mostert well, but at the same time, it was good to see the growth from Elijah Mitchell. How about not Ambry Thomas, Emmanuel Mosley's ascension as well too to CB1. Obviously, coming into the season, he was supposed to be CB2 with Jason Verrett there, but injuries happen. That's a part of football. So the ascension of Emmanuel Mosley, and then, as I talked about a little bit ago too, just the mental toughness from a 3-5 start to be able to close out the season strong. And yes, our offense did struggle there going into the postseason and inside of the postseason. This defense is legit. This defense deserved to be in the Super Bowl, and I thought this was a good opportunity for us to get number 6. That didn't quite happen, but from that standpoint, I'd say the season was a success. But you have to look at it from multiple angles. It's hard just to say yes or no. I think if you include the totality of it all, I'd say yes. And then the last thing I would add too is, I had always I was one that said Trey Lance should start from week 1. I believe you said the same thing as well too. But if he was never going to start, which the 49ers held steadfast in that, I'm not mad that what he got to see on the field. He was able 100%. To see. There we go. He was able to see what the totality of what a season could be like, from the struggle, 3-5, trying to find our identity. Offense wasn't clicking. Defense could have played a little bit more sound. A lot of PIs early on. A lot of self-inflicted wounds is really what I'm getting at. A lot of self-inflicted wounds that ended up turning around in the second half of the season. And I know the cliche is it's a long season, but it really is a long season, and you have a chance to turn your season around really each and every week that there is. So from him not playing, I still think Trey Lance got valuable experience from seeing a tight-knit locker room. There's a lot of veteran presence in terms of leadership in there as well too. How do you respond on a week in and week out basis? Up and down QB play, but I'm sure Jimmy Garoppolo continues to be, a calm kind of presence in that locker room. Some players have even said the same thing. So the fact that we were 3-5, Trey Lance was able to see what that's like. We were able to turn it around, go 7-2, and he was also able to experience playoff football. So not just ending the season strong, actually got to see what a playoff football environment is like too. I think that's only going to do good for him. And yes, I'm excited about what he's going to do going forward, starting this season. But if you weren't going to play him, which they've held steadfast that they weren't going to play him this year, he still was able to experience really the ups and downs in one season of what it's like to be in an NFL locker room. He got to experience essentially everything but a Super Bowl, and I love that for the kid.
Exactly. I think you hit it on perfectly. Well said there. And when you're looking at the entirety of the 49ers season, there's really one word that kind of describes it, and that's overreaction. When we started,
Mm,
you and I both said Trey Lance, I thought Trey Lance could have started week one, and I don't think I would have batted an eye. I think that there were like at the beginning of the season, I looked at the 49ers schedule and tried to pinpoint where can Trey Lance really start. I
right.
thought it'd be week one. Then there was week 6. We had a bye week. Then we faced the Colts, but the Colts had a fairly solid defense. So I was a little skeptical because
Hmm.
right after that Colts game, what happens? We play Chicago. Then we go straight into a strong, or no, we play, Colts in week 7, Chicago. But then we face the Rams and the Cardinals.
Hmm.
Rams in week 10, Cardinals in week 9. So
Right.
it would be a tough set of matchups. But like
And that
since we have
Cardinals team,
such
to
an
your point, they were playing their best football at that
right,
point in time.
exactly.
Obviously, you want to peak later, like we did, which is what the Niners did. We struggled
Yeah.
out of the gate. They were strong out of the gate. So that's a great point.
Exactly. So like I think the early bye week definitely I don't think it would we can say it hurt the Niners as an overall team, but it hurt the
Hmm.
chances of Trey Lance starting early on because there weren't really many opportunities for it later. I did think that if Trey Lance hadn't sprained his knee in week 5, I think we would have seen him on the field in week 7 because Garoppolo was injured. We played a not 100% Garoppolo in week 7. He didn't look well, and Trey Lance's injury stemmed into the first practice of week 8, which is why he was limited
Right.
in that week. And that's where Garoppolo made his turnaround. In week 8 against the Bears, he threw 17 of 28 for 322 yards. And then he
Hmm.
went on from there on that 8-game-ish pretty strong stretch of performances where he wasn't really he didn't turn over the ball as much as he normally did, although he
Right.
had a couple of poor costly plays. He played in very efficient. Like in the Rams game, he threw only 19 passes but completed 15 of them, 182 yards, over 10 yards per pass. That's an
Right.
efficient game. And so
Real good
looking
on
at
third and
it,
fourth down in that game as well.
exactly, especially on that 4th and 6 to Debo to clinch the game, essentially.
That's right.
And so, looking at the entirety of the 49ers season, can you really blame them for not starting Trey Lance week 1? No, because Kyle Shanahan, even in week 17 against the Texans, he said, at some points, I was still struggling to create plays or call plays for Trey Lance because I hadn't had the familiarity. And sure, you get
Right.
familiarity as the season goes on. But when you're deemed a Super Bowl contender or whatever at the beginning of the season, it's hard to try and address familiarity rather than
Right.
trying to address consistency. So on that, I do agree with what you said about Lance and Garoppolo. But overall, I think that Trey Lance definitely improved as the season went along. And I do think
Agree.
the scout team kind of this thing is a little bit underrated. We saw how it worked for Lance in that he was able to work through progressions a little quicker in week 17, and he seemed a little more comfortable in the pocket, especially in the second half. So I
Hmm.
thought that that was definitely his best half of football throughout the entire season. So when you look at that, maybe some teams go the scout team way, try and have their quarterback learn different types of offenses to see different types of schemes
Hmm.
against a very good defense like the 49ers defensive practice. So I'm excited for him next year. But overall, you're right. The heart of this team never faltered. And I think if you do make a quarterback change mid-season, the problem is you're going to hurt the locker room because guess what? You're kind of caving in and you're kind of telling your like the rest of the organization, guess what? We're making a different change. And even though you can put on the face that it's going to help you win games, it to the locker room, it's like, guys, we're going to reset. We're going to try something new. And that might not do well, especially with the locker room of veterans and guys on expiring contracts trying to get their next contract because it might mean that their own futures are at risk. So I thought it was good to ride with consistency late in the season or mid-season going into late in the season. And given the way that we ended from 3-5 to the NFC Championship, although we had very high expectations going into the season, I think that we can deem the 49ers season success when considering all the aspects for sure.
I agree with you 100%. And you said something that I think a lot of people kind of gloss over that I would like to just mention again really quick too. When Trey Lance came in, it was a little bumpy ride for a bit because Kyle Shanahan had to get used to a different style of a
Right.
quarterback. I think it's easy for people to say, oh, well, he didn't play that well. He hasn't played in 2 or 3 months. Of course, he's going to come out a little slower, a little sloppy, versus the Cardinals game, between the Cardinals game and the improvements he's made and the development he had as a scout team QB to playing in that Week 17 game, a lot of people can say, oh, well, he came out and he was a little sloppy in the first half. Just before the half ended, he seemed to kind of turn it around a little bit, and then the second half was much better. What I'd say is it as much as we want to talk about the quarterback maybe not playing that well, I also want to include the coach too, and not even just the coach, the play caller. So if it was the OC and it was the OC that's calling plays, then I would have said the same thing for that person. And I just want to mention that just because they're two totally different styles of quarterbacks, Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo. And if you look at the play styles, even in that one game versus the way that Jimmy Garoppolo plays, we were pushing the ball down the field a little bit more. Trey Lance is a bit more aggressive throwing the ball down the field. And I think some people can sometimes misinterpret what aggressive means. It doesn't mean he's being, foolish with the ball or anything or careless with it. No, he just has the ability to push the ball down the field. And those shot plays are also called for Jimmy Garoppolo as well, too. He just doesn't necessarily take them as many times.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean that it's like, oh, wow, look, we've got Travis Benjamin running a deep post. Like, whoa, Jimmy Garoppolo never throws that. No, those are also called in. And sometimes you can use those plays as clear outs. But at the same time, Jimmy Garoppolo and I won't say he doesn't have the ability. I just don't think that he consistently pushes the ball downfield enough that way. And so my main point here, and I don't want to rant too much about this, my main point is just as much as we talk about Trey Lance and, his possible slow start, which to me is valid after not having played in, so many weeks. We need to also include that the OC, the head coach who's calling the plays has to be accountable as well, too. It takes some time to get into a rhythm, whether it be calling a pass on the first play of the game, calling a run. Sometimes a quarterback needs to get hit first. I know people have said that I need to get hit, then I can kind of settle in. Let me get hit, let me get my first completion, then I'm settled into the game. Well, guess what? This was our first extended look at Trey Lance. And what I mean by that was his second start, but our first extended look at him. Yeah. I saw a lot of things in that game that I wasn't sure about. I know coming into that game, a lot of people were saying Trey Lance won't be able to execute the quick game. Jimmy Garoppolo has a quicker release. And I think that when people say those things, you have to have a little bit of substance behind what that means. So when people were saying that, I get what they were saying. I didn't. Some people were saying that Trey Lance couldn't execute the quick game the way that Jimmy Garoppolo could. And I don't expect him to, considering one's a rookie, the other one's been in this system for 5 years. But I was able to see from Trey Lance that he is able to hit some of those quick slants. He is able to hit some of those tight window throws. I saw that. I didn't know how much to expect in that game. And I say that just to say I saw already between the Cardinals game and the Texans game improvement, not only in his throwing motion. I saw improvement throughout the course of from the beginning of that game to the end of that game, like drive by drive improvement from him starting to trust his eyes, seeing receivers open, trusting that they would be in the spot that they were supposed to be, and throwing the ball. He has the ability to run, extend plays with his legs. Yeah, and we're all, we like that. We're infatuated by that. But he's a quarterback first. He wants to throw the ball, and he wants to use his brain. And I love that about him. And I think the kid's really set up to really take off this next year. And what does that mean? Does that mean he's going to be an MVP or anything like that? No, I'm not saying that. But I am saying that I think that he has the ability to execute this offense at a league average level starting this next year. I've been the one that's always said, do I think you could get Trey Lance to give you 20 touchdowns, 12 picks? Or I'd say 20 touchdowns, 15 total turnovers. Can he give you that? Yeah, I think so. I think he has the ability to give you that in year one and possibly more than that. That's what we were able to see from Jimmy Garoppolo this year. 20 touchdowns. I think it was 15 total turnovers. 12 of them were interceptions. I believe Trey Lance has the ability to do that and more. It just may not look exactly like how we saw Jimmy Garoppolo do it. And that's totally fine. I think the Niners don't expect that anyway. So I just wanted to just point that point out.
Yeah. And another underrated part for those harping on Trey Lance early, when you're talking about coordinators, not only do they have to worry about the quarterback, but they got to worry about scheming the offensive line properly. And with Trey Lance and Garoppolo, a part of why their play styles are so different, like that part also extends to how the offensive line has to play different, which is why we selected guys like Aaron Banks, who were set up for a power scheme in 2022 when Trey Lance was going to be a quarterback, rather than a more zone run scheme and a more agile scheme with Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback that utilizes the quick game. So it's definitely different schemes, which is why the offensive line struggled in week 5 against the Cardinals. You see it on the first play where the right tackle, I believe, was Mike McGlinchey or Compton. Forget who was playing in that game. He gets burned on the McGlinchey gets burned on the first play of the game just because it's different. Like against Trey Lance, you probably have nerves. You probably make one wrong step, and it's a free rusher. So like that improved over the week or over the course of the year. Trey Lance in week 17, he was more prepared. And so I think that definitely will play a role. And with a complete offseason with the first team offensive line, I think Trey Lance definitely has a lot of room to grow. But that leads me to the offseason part. The 49ers, their coaching staff has had a little ups and downs recently with a lot of hirings outside offensive line coaches being hired. But the biggest one, or the biggest two, one was D'Amico staying, but the other guy, offensive coordinator Mike McDaniel, just went to Miami. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm happy for the guy. I think he deserves a shot. I hope – I've tweeted this out a couple times too. I hope he's given a fair shake in light of what's come out in the past, week or so with that organization and possibly, buying teams, trying to pay coaches to possibly tank, which we found out now that Brian Flores is not built that way. I still think he's a really good coach. I was shocked that he got fired in the first place. So I'm happy for Mike McDaniel, but I'm also hoping that he's given a fair shake. And what I mean by that is I don't think it's going to turn around in year one. Yes, I do think that defense that they have out there is really solid. It's really good. But I also think with Tua Tagovailoa, I think he's a limited quarterback. He's in a similar vein as Jimmy Garoppolo, at least to this point in his career. That doesn't mean he can't possibly improve. But I think at this point in his career, it's safe to say that he likes to win more over the middle. He's not going to consistently push the ball down the field. He can do that. I don't think he's going to consistently do that. And I don't think he's going to consistently throw the ball outside the numbers as well. But Mike McDaniel has worked with Jimmy Garoppolo since he's been here, really. And I think the reason that I expect and think that McDaniel will do well, although he's never been a head coach before, he's been with the Shanahans in the Shanahan system since about 05-06, I think it was 05-06 season.
05,
and I like that he's been with that. He's also worked with Gary Kubiak when he was with the Texans, I believe it was at that time.
I think so.
So he's been inside of this system. He's been inside. He's going to be a product of the Shanahans, both Mike and Kyle. I think that he's also somewhat of a mystery. He's been the run game coordinator with the Niners here before he was the offensive coordinator for just this past year. And so we're going to find out. I think we'll find out how much. I think it's almost twofold. We'll find out how much he meant to the 49ers in terms of what he did bring to the run game. And I'm sure we'll touch on Anthony Lynn as well and what he can bring to the 49ers. But I think we're also going to be able to see with the Dolphins what he's able to bring to them in terms of the run game as well, whether it be outside zone, whatever else he wants to bring to that team. But there's a mystery around him because he's been running backs coach. He's been a wide receivers coach in the past. He's been kind of behind the scenes, but I've also heard a lot about him being one of, if not the mastermind behind a lot of the running schemes and the running creativity that we do in the 49ers offense. So like I said, I hope he's given a fair shake. I'm excited for him. He seems, he's a little bit of a quirkier guy, funny. He seems like you can kind of relate to him though too. So I'm hoping, if they start out this next year and they're not winning right away, I hope players don't turn on him. I hope the fan base doesn't just turn on him. You're not gonna fix these organizations overnight. I don't expect that. So what I mean by a fair shake, I hope they're gonna give him time to be able to help turn that offense, help turn that team around. And the last point I'll make here in regards to this, he didn't draft Tua Tagovailoa. So are they gonna allow him to, if he's not, he's not willing to work with him, or he's not sold on him possibly after this year, are they going to allow him to go out and find another quarterback, whether that's free agency, whether that's in the draft, and, you know, possibly try to mold that quarterback? Would they do that? I hope they would. I think that's what, if you don't want to be a poverty franchise, you have to know that some of these things do take time. And as you said earlier, the topic that we talked about in regards to the 49ers was overreaction. I hope that's the same thing with the Dolphins. Hopefully they don't overreact to him if they, you know, possibly have a losing season. So very happy for him. I hope he's given a fair shake. If not, he will definitely be welcomed back with open arms if he wants to come back this way, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely. And talking about the fair shake, obviously what the Miami Dolphins did with Brian Flores, both in firing him and asking him to incentivizing him to lose games, I thought both were wrong.
Right.
I thought Brian Flores was one of the better coaches with 2 winning seasons. But talking strictly McDaniel, the one thing that I liked about the Dolphins McDaniel connection was that they tried to hire him as their offensive coordinator last year. The 49ers chose to promote Mike McDaniel to offensive coordinator so that the Dolphins wouldn't get the opportunity to hire him as the offensive coordinator. So there is the connection. And even last year, Tua Tagovailoa was the quarterback on the roster, and that was the guy that Miami wanted. So there was the connection, and I'm hoping that the project works with Tua, because Tua ran a Shanahan-style offense with Steve Sarkisian in Alabama during his college days, and that's exactly the style that Mike McDaniel's bringing over. And I think Tua hasn't really been benefited by both a good offensive line and a good running game, which Mike McDaniel has proven to bring out of undrafted free agents and different players that suit his style. And so we've seen guys like Tom Compton this year look like serviceable offensive linemen, when in reality they've struggled in pass blocking situations over a bulkier workload. And if we can see Mike McDaniel work with the Miami offensive linemen in a similar fashion, try and exploit their strengths to get a effective run game and also effective quick game, which plays to Tua Tagovailoa's strengths, you might see a more prolific Miami offense that can compete with their defense and have a solid season, because they were a solid team this year. It's not like they were a poor team. So they potentially could compete for a playoff spot. I'm not sure what they do in free agency and all that, but they could potentially compete for a playoff spot this year. And I thought the McDaniel hiring was fantastic. Like you said, he's been with the Shanahans for since the 05-06 season. And
yeah, that's like 15 years.
Exactly. And there's been a huge trust between Shanahan and McDaniel. I think Albert Breer commented earlier this week that Shanahan just trusted McDaniel to formulate the game plans earlier in the week for the run game while he worked on the pass game before they met, and have him implement the scheme. So definitely McDaniel has a lot of experience implementing stuff. But you're right. The one mystery is the mystery around these coaches that don't call plays, turning it to head coaches. We don't know how exactly they fare. There's a reason that a guy like Eric Bieniemy hasn't really gotten a head coaching job yet, right? I mean, there are a lot of things that could factor into that, right? Be it poor interview, be it the racism issue, be it that he just hasn't called plays, be it whatever a number amount of reasons.
And the last point there, it might be that he just hasn't found a coaching fit for him as well too. I agree with you. I think it's all those points, but I think if he's not interested as well too, it stops there as well. I'm with you though.
You're right. But one thing that I'll point to in terms of optimism is Miami could also hire an offensive coordinator to call plays, although if it comes from the Shanahan tree, that obviously won't be the case if it's a guy like Bobby Slowick who follows McDaniel there. Because when I look at a team like the New York Giants this offseason, General Manager Joe Schoen, the former Buffalo Bills guy in the front office, he hired Brian Dable as their coach, and Brian Dable is actually not expected to call plays. It's going to be Joe Kafka, the Chiefs passing coordinator, who's now their new OC, because Joe Schoen said he didn't want Dable to be worried about play calling, but rather game decisions. So it's going to be interesting to see whether we see McDaniel in a similar situation this offseason, this upcoming season, if Miami has a play caller or if they have McDaniel run play calls like Shanahan did.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I believe one of your questions as well that you have for me is, what is the plan at offensive coordinator now for the 49ers? And obviously we just brought in Anthony Lynn as well too. But to your point, and to that point, I'm going to mention this name because, I think there's the potential, and obviously we're not Miami Dolphins fans, we don't really follow them too much, but we obviously have connections with them now in regards to Mike McDaniel and the fact that we know a little bit, at least about him. And the question that's going through my head is, of the 49ers staff members, coaching staff, like, would he take someone? Would he take anyone? Is he going to be able to? Is Kyle going to – not he's going to let him because they can't block those, interviews or like stuff anymore. But the question is, would he take somebody from our staff potentially to be his OC? And I've considered possibly Rich Scangarello if he's going to end up being let go. You had already said Slowick as well too. Like, are those potential people who could get pulled? Are those people that he might be interested in taking? There's a lot of questions up in the air in regards to what he will or won't do. But I feel like that's a potential. Rich Scangarello is a potential name you could see potentially head that way. And we'll talk about this a little bit later in the show too. Not only coaches, but are there any players that he might want to, take over there as well too? We've got a heavy dose of free agents, on the dock as well too. So would he be interested in taking any players? And I have a couple names that I'm sure he'd be interested in taking. The question is, will the Niners match? We'll see what happens. But yeah, to your point, the last point that you made there that I wanted to touch on too a little bit, the fact that, Tua Tagovailoa is used more. He likes to run an offense similar to a Garoppolo in terms of throwing the ball over the middle, yards after catch. We'll see how they use Jalen Waddle. He might even have a better year than he did this year, which is kind of crazy to say considering the amount of touches he got already this year, going over 100 touches. He's going to be an ultimate weapon for them. He's not a Deebo Samuel, but he can be used in similar ways as a Deebo Samuel. He's nowhere near as physical. The question is, if they use him like that, would he be able to hold up? Who knows? I wouldn't say he's an injury-prone player here right now. But the point that you touched on is that offensive line, and that's been something that they've been trying to fix over the course of, I'd say, 3 to 4 years. They drafted about every year early on in the draft too, and it hasn't worked out too well for them. So yeah, I'm really interested to see what they do in free agency, also in the draft. I don't remember all the players on their line, but the first name that comes to my mind is like Liam Eichenberg. They've got a few other players on the offensive line who I think at this point are underwhelming. So the question is, what do they do in regards to that? Do they bring in a couple of free agents? Because I would assume under McDaniel that they're going to run the ball pretty consistently. I would assume that. I don't remember all the backs that they have on their team either. I believe that they have good, I'd say, like secondary linebackers, no real lead back. And I don't want to get too far ahead, but I feel like McDaniel, they'd be very, very interested in Raheem Mostert. I won't say too much on that, but I agree with you to that point that you were saying.
Yeah. And speaking on if the 49ers should replace him, I wrote about this earlier today, and I don't actually think the 49ers are going to name an offensive coordinator this year, which actually leads the way for a guy like Bobby Slowick if he wants a promotion to leave San Francisco and go to Miami, because I think the 49ers from 2017 to 2020, they didn't have an offensive coordinator. I think they go back to it in 2022, especially with the hiring of Anthony Lynn. He's an assistant head coach, so I think they're going to keep their roles of assistants on offense, have Ryans be the defensive coordinator, and have assistants on defense to kind of lead this team. Because Anthony Lynn, that hiring was kind of it was coincidental because it happened on that that Friday in the afternoon, right after that presumed McDaniel interview that took 8 to 10 hours. And so the timing is definitely interesting because McDaniel probably told Shanahan about his thoughts and whether he'd take the job or not. Then the 49ers go out and hire a run game specialist in Anthony Lynn, who's been an amazing guy. In that perspective, he helped that Chargers offense run the football very effectively. He was in Detroit this past offseason. DeAndre Swift had probably his best season of his career, and they had Jamal Williams in there as well. So he's definitely going to be a very beneficial guy, and he probably could be very helpful for a guy like Trey Sermon because he's more implementative of the power scheme that Melvin Gordon liked to run as a member of the Chargers. And also he could help Trey Sermon as a receiving back because that's another facet of the Anthony Lynn offense. But quickly, what were your thoughts on Anthony Lynn's hiring?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I won't really add too much more to that other than the fact that I think it's a home run hire. I love the fact that he's had multiple coaching stops. He's been a head coach. I believe he's a strong character guy. I believe that he's someone who could come into this locker room, and if he doesn't agree with Shanahan, he wouldn't just BS him. he would, be able to say and use his voice to explain why he does or doesn't agree with something. Yeah, you touched on it well too. The fact that, he's worked with multiple teams, whether it be running backs coach, an assistant head coach. We know he was there in Buffalo with Rex Ryan. He also then took over as the interim head coach when Rex Ryan was let go as well too. And he's consistently put out, whether it be 1,000-yard receivers or 1,000-yard rushers like Fred Taylor. And even then, when he didn't put out, 1,000-yard receivers, he'd have 2,000-yard rushing teams. So he's always been consistently good with his running backs. He's always been consistently good with his scheme as well too. And you touched on the point that I was just going to touch on as well too in regards to Trey Sermon, a very similar back to a Melvin Gordon. So I'm looking at Trey Sermon this year thinking, okay, it's year 2. Let's see what happens with him. He's going to have a whole year. Really, I know he didn't play much, but a whole year in the system, especially at the point I'd say if Raheem's not back, even if Raheem is back.
Yeah, you're right.
Is Jeff Wilson or anybody else potentially not back? I think at this point we're going to see Trey Sermon get his opportunities. I'm going to mention this part a little bit later as well too, but I'm really intrigued on what he can do with Trey Sermon. I think we're going to see a different Trey Sermon this year. I'm excited about the potential of what he can do.
Yeah, definitely. And then obviously speaking of Raheem Mostert, I wanted to touch on who are the key players do you think the 49ers should retain? And then who could also leave to the Dolphins?
Yeah, great question. So one name that I'm really interested in. I'll start with Raheem Mostert since we're already talking about running backs. I'll say that one. So he's one that interests me because if we can get him back on a team-friendly contract, I would love it. I think he's different. He's just a different type of back. When he's on the field, it provides a different level of electricity that pretty much no one else on the team brings. Deebo Samuel did a very good job at that. So it's similar to what Deebo Samuel did out of the backfield as well too, which just props to Deebo for being just the player that he is. He's an elite football player. And I think when I say football player, I mean, you could probably line this kid up at like 9 different spots on the field, whether it be offense or defense, and he can be at minimum average. So Deebo Samuel's amazing, but we're not here to talk about Deebo Samuel. In regards to Raheem Mostert, like I said, if it can be a team-friendly deal, I'd love to have him back, even at minimum, just to be the lightning to Elijah Mitchell's thunder. I think having 2 backs, and I think with Raheem Mostert, I personally think he's best used in a 2-back system. I think arguably his best year was 2019. And obviously we went to the Super Bowl that year. And I think the consensus around the running backs was the 49ers ride with the hot hand, right? I've used that many times. I'm sure multiple people have said, Kyle Shanahan likes to ride with the hot hand, which is interesting to me, and I agree with it. But it's funny, if you look back at that season, you might see Tevin Coleman start the game, and you probably see Raheem Mostert end the game. But the funny thing is, I actually did a little digging, and I went back and looked at it. And during that season, did you know that both Raheem Mostert and Tevin Coleman both had 137 carries? So talk about a split right down the middle. Both had 137 carries. Mostert had 137 for 772 yards, 8 touchdowns. Coleman ended 137 for 544, 6 TDs.
Nasty.
Talk about thunder and lightning. I think when you see a Raheem Mostert, he's probably the closest thing we've seen to like a Chris Johnson. So if you can have a guy like that who can average like 5.7 yards a carry, which is outlandish, that's insane. If you have a guy like that and you could potentially bring him back, yeah, I know he's 30, but that's the type of guy you bring back on a shorter deal if you can. If you can't, I have no problem going forward and seeing what Trey Sermon can do, Jermichael Hasty, because Elijah Mitchell did show this year that he can be a bell cow back. Yes, in a 17-game season and with as much running as we did this year, I'd be concerned if he's going to continue to get that much wear and tear on his body, especially knowing that there are other capable backs on the roster as well too. So I'd like to see a little bit more balance. I've been griping about that for weeks now, to be honest, but I'd like to see a little bit more balance. But at the same time, I guess I could see Kyle riding with the hot hand, as I've been using, because he feels that player gives them the best chance to win. When it really came down to it, once we really got in playoff mode and in the playoffs, it was I almost said Raheem Mostert. It was Elijah Mitchell and Deebo Samuel. So Deebo Samuel, a wide receiver, spent a bulk of his time in the backfield as well too. So that's why I say just a great football player. But knowing that you have a Jeff Wilson, a Jermichael Hasty, and I'm hoping going forward, this next year, having Trey Sermon be at minimum RB3, I'm excited about what the options can be going forward. So I'd love to retain Raheem Mostert if we could. If we can't, that's what I was going to say earlier. I see Miami going big time. I think Miami would probably pay him a larger contract to go home. He's from Florida as well too. That might be enticing, as well as already having a familiarity with Mike McDaniel. That's going to be hard to pass up. So the Niners, I feel like the Niners will have to come correct. But at the same time, if he's willing to stay because of our Super Bowl aspirations, if he believes in a Trey Lance, if he likes the fit here with the 49ers, if he thinks or knows anything about Anthony Lynn, I think that there's a possibility we get him. That's going to be a little interesting battle this offseason between, I personally feel, the 49ers and the Dolphins. Who's going to get Raheem Mostert? I think it's really going to come down to those two teams. So at that point, does he want to go home? Is he comfortable with the familiarity here with the Niners? Who knows? We'll see. So that's one that's really interesting to me. Another one, DJ Jones. I'd love the 49ers to be able to bring him back. Talk about just an interior offensive lineman or interior defensive tackle. He had his best season to date. I believe that he played 51% of the defensive snaps this year, which is the healthiest he's been. So in my personal opinion, health is wealth. I think that he's really good, both run defending as well as in pass coverage as well too. I personally feel him, Eric Armstead, both have done a lot, especially in the passing game where they are pressuring quarterbacks or allowing. What I'm trying to say is their pressure on the quarterback has allowed guys like Ebukam, Willis, Key to be able to get home, even in Nick Bosa. And I think that sometimes those things go a little underrated. Just the pressure that those guys can get, especially with Kinlaw being out, having Armstead and DJ Jones there in the middle. If you can get that initial push up the middle, that can mess up a whole play. So I think you see guys like Key, who had a career year this year, Jordan Willis, who's made some key plays, Omenahu. If you go back and just watch the Cowboys game, Armstead and DJ Jones were just monsters. And you could say that about multiple games throughout the season. I know we ended up losing at Seattle, but I thought DJ Jones is arguably the best player on the field in that particular game. So he's one. DJ Jones, especially not knowing what we're going to get back in Kinlaw. I'd rather go with the it's kind of weird to say, but at this point, the more proven commodity, which is kind of interesting to say because DJ Jones has had his injury concerns as well in the past. But when fully healthy, when on the field, I truly think he's one of the better interior linemen in the league.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And speaking first on Raheem Mostert, I'm really, really excited. I was excited last year, and I'm excited this year to see if we could get a Raheem Mostert, Elijah Mitchell package. Because really, if Raheem Mostert comes back, this 49ers team has 5 running backs on the roster next year. And they might not all be considered running backs, but I mean, Mostert, Elijah Mitchell, Trey Lance, Deebo Samuel, and then Kyle Juszczyk, if you consider him a running back. And that's to say not even Trey Sermon. So I guess 6 with Trey Sermon included. And so just seeing the variety of runners on this team, I think that that's wonders for a new coach like Anthony Lynn or Kyle Shanahan to kind of scheme up and see how differently can we use this running back like this rushing unit. Because the 49ers last year, they were put in an uncomfortable situation when Raheem Mostert went down, because now guess what? You have to rely on a bell cow type of back. And while that's not a bad thing at all, because Elijah Mitchell rushed for 4.7 yards per carry last year, would have gotten 1,000 yards, like you said. I think he ended at 963. Like, he was definitely very effective in his role, but he had his fair share of injuries. And this 49ers offense is normally predicated on having different players that have different strengths so that you can open up the field a lot more in the passing game, which is why Jimmy Garoppolo had an easier experience in 2019 and things like that, which is why the 49ers made that run. It's just because they have different ways and different avenues to rush the football. And I think that with such a diverse group, especially with Raheem Mostert back, who probably has the best vision and best speed of the group, and probably the most familiarity because this scheme is kind of meant for Raheem Mostert in an outside zone type of scheme. I think that he's an amazing fit. You're right. The money will play a matter because a guy like Mike McDaniel will want familiarity going into a season. And a guy like Raheem Mostert can bail out an offensive line with that speed and vision, which is why he's such a valuable asset when healthy. So Raheem Mostert, he made $2.9 million in the last 2 seasons on average. So he probably, if he can somehow scrounge $2 million out of the Miami Dolphins pockets without getting even though he's had like a spotty injury history over the last 2 years, I think that's a win for him because he gets to go home. But I think if that's not the case, if the 49ers can somehow get Mostert back, it's definitely a win in my eyes. I thought he was one of the valuable players on this team that can be brought back at a cheap cost. That's a veteran. He could help the running back group alongside Anthony Lynn and Bobby Turner. And definitely, I thought that Mostert could be a building block for this running game next season because of his unique ability that not many backs have in the NFL. And then the second player you bring up, DJ Jones. I just think DJ Jones is a must bring back because DJ Jones, he led the ESPN in run stop win rate, I believe, this year. Which is an elite rank among all defensive tackles. Like you're talking all defensive tackles in the NFL. And so when you talk about that type of commodity, when you're not going to have to pay him as much as you pay an elite defensive tackle, I think that you have to bring him back regardless of what you think about the potential of Kinlaw. Because just like players like Trey Sermon, right now you're trying to compete in the present while also preparing for the future. So if you believe you're high on Javon Kinlaw, why not place him alongside guys like DJ Jones and Arik Armstead, where you can learn the best of both abilities, and you can prepare yourself for the future while also putting yourself in the best competitive stance to help not only Trey Lance, but the entire team in 2022, which I think is very important for a team probably contending for a Super Bowl next season, since they just made the NFC Championship with an average quarterback.
Yeah, that's the thing right there, right? With a DJ Jones, you essentially can save yourself from, or at least shield yourself from the potential of, I don't want to say Kinlaw being a bust, but if he's not able to be the same type of player, if he's best used possibly at that point in his career going forward as a rotational piece, well, you're shielding yourself if you can get a DJ Jones back. He's only 26 years old, so he's going to be 27 next year. You could reasonably sign into a 4-year deal. And if all things work out and somehow Kinlaw comes back after this surgery and he's just ends up being a better player than DJ Jones and, takes that spot back, well, I don't think DJ Jones is magically going to be worse or bad next year. He's still a potential trade candidate. I'm not saying I would trade him or anything like that, but I'm saying if you were to look at 2 scenarios, I'd rather protect myself with a known commodity, a person I personally think is slightly, actually probably league-wide, I think he's probably really underrated. 49ers fans we're aware of him because we watch him on a weekly basis. And those who are really deep into football will go look at the all-22 and say, man, this dude's amazing. I think his speed to power combo ratio is insane. For someone who's 6 foot, 305 pounds, and I've watched him. He moves, man. I've watched him chase down a Russell Wilson after obliterating a lineman right there in the middle of it's insane. Yeah. So I think after guys like Chris Jones and Aaron Donald, he's up there in terms of just the ability to rush the passer from that position, the ability to stop. As you said, he was number 1 at run stop win rate this year, 48%. Yeah. I think it was 48%. That's insane. That's great. So, yes, it was a career year. And some people would say, oh, well, he had his best season in his career year. You're absolutely right. But he also played the most snaps of his career. So to me, that says, oh, when he's healthy, if he's able to stay on the field, this is the type of level of production we could expect from him. Yes, by year to year, sometimes the production might be slightly up or slightly lower. But if this is the base, I don't want to say baseline, if this is what we're going to get from this guy, that's a guy you can work around. And I just think I think he's really underrated. Him and Arik Armstead are arguably, arguably, I think they're possibly two of the most important players on this defense. You could make an argument for many players. You could make an argument for Kwaski Tart and Jimmy Ward in the way that they played this year as well. You could talk about Bosa, what he does as well too. But I think honestly, if I'm going to be real about this, and Jimmy Ward has said this himself, what those guys do up front makes it easier for the secondary as well too. He said that in his interviews as well too. So to me, it comes down to DJ Jones, Arik Armstead, the pressure that those guys get. They may not be the ones that make the play, but they can get pressure consistently, and they allow plays to be finished or made, whether it be tackle for loss leader Nick Bosa, whether it be a career year from Arden Key. I think he had 8 sacks. Didn't he end up getting 8?
Yeah.
8.5?
8 sacks,
something like that. 8 sacks after having 3 in the course of his whole tenure with the Raiders. Right. So just the plays that those two guys make, I know I'm ranting here a little bit, but the plays that those two guys make, they deserve their props. And I think, as you said, as I've said as well, I don't think you can pass up on DJ Jones. I think, as I said, I'll just in synopsis, you're able to protect yourself from the potential loss. Not saying he would be potential loss if the worst outcome is Kinlaw can't be the player that we expect him to be, if he has to retire in 2 years from something, based off what happened. We never know, so you're able to protect yourself from that. I think DJ Jones has to be brought back. If we're going to transition just to one other player that I also think should be brought back, Laken Tomlinson, I think he's got to be brought back. I know he's 30 years old, going to be 30 years old. Yeah. But I mean, in my personal opinion, I guess it's the way I view team building. When you trade for a guy like a Laken Tomlinson, I think that was 2017. We traded for him. He had 2 years in Detroit. When you trade for a guy and he continues to improve year after year, and I think he's kind of plateaued now, but I think he's still a hell of a guard, really good left guard. And I also factor in consistency with him, camaraderie that he has with already being and working within this system as well. Familiarity with the system and the offense. He's seen what it would be like with the Trey Lance. Obviously, Trey Lance didn't start for the majority of the season. He only started a couple games. But the familiarity with the offense, his familiarity, his comfortability with Trent Williams, that left side could essentially be, I don't want to say a lockdown, but really close to lockdown, probably about as best as you can get. And with a young quarterback, I mean, with any quarterback, you want your O-line to be stout. You want him to be really good. But I think especially with the young quarterback and with the question marks already at right guard, at right tackle, and potentially a question mark there at center, I think it makes it even more imperative that you bring back a Laken Tomlinson. You have Jalen Moore, you've got Aaron Banks, Brunskill. What I'd do is I'd have those guys come back to camp and battle it out for right guard at that position. That's what I would do. We have to see if Alex Mack is he going to retire every year since year 10. I think he just finished year 13, I believe. Since year 10, he always takes time in the offseason and says, am I going to retire? He mulls it over whether he's going to retire or not. So at this point, what I would say is I think it's even more imperative to bring him back now because of the potential turnover you're already going to have throughout the rest of the offensive line already. So I'd bring him back. I think he deserves it. And to his point too, Trent Williams, what he just did, what his contract was at 33 years old, you can still get a nice sum of money at 30 plus if you're a good offensive lineman. You're
right. And speaking first on DJ Jones, the last thing I want to say on the topic is, even if Javon Kinlaw turns out to be the player you want to be, this 49ers defensive line, what they proved this season compared to their 2019 year, where a lot of people thought this defensive line was better, was that they value depth. They brought 10 defensive linemen onto this roster, including the likes of Maurice Hurst and players like that, over other positions. 10 defensive linemen out of their 53-man roster were on the defensive line. I think that is that just shows what they prioritize. D'Amico Ryan said last offseason, this 49ers defense was going to start from the bottom up. They're going to start from the defensive line, look to it to generate pressure, and the other two groups will respond to that. And so having a guy like DJ Jones and Javon Kinlaw, even if you rotate them, just getting the best of both players, keeping them both healthy, while also getting valuable snaps from both of them on that defensive line in both the run and the pass situations, I think that's a valuable get. Even if you bring DJ Jones back at whatever cost it may be. But second on Laken Tomlinson, I think he, out of all players, he is the must bring back, and I'll say why. On February 15th, Lakin Tomlinson has a dead like a dead money cap hit because his contract has a void that incurs on February 15th of $1.2 million. So that's kind of like the decision date where the 49ers are going to choose to bring back Tomlinson or not. And if the 49ers don't bring back Tomlinson, they're taking on negative cap. So why would he take on negative cap for a player who plays at a Pro Bowl level, who's been consistent over the last couple of years and consistently grown into a better guard at a position of need as well, because the offensive line hasn't been, or the offensive line, especially the right side later in the season, wasn't as strong as you'd want it to be. So why would you cause more turmoil while also taking on negative cap? I don't think that adds up, which is why I think Lakin Tomlinson gets an extension over the next week. DJ Jones would probably be next in line, but Lakin Tomlinson, definitely. He played at a Pro Bowl level this year. I know people are saying, why not move Aaron Banks to left guard, draft a right guard? But having Trey Lance coming in next season, you want the most consistency and availability that you have possible. And if you're going to have a similar system, you definitely want veterans to run that system for Trey Lance, at least in year one, while developing players in the backside. So while Alex Mack might retire this offseason, if he comes back next offseason for another season, I think we run him at center. We draft a center to develop behind Alex Mack for a year so that he can be prepared for 2022 in this 49ers offense, because it's very complicated. So Lakin Tomlinson-wise, I do think we should bring him back, especially after the level that he played this year in both run and pass situations. Trent Williams endorsed it. So expect an extension over the next week, but I do think he's one guy we bring back.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Yeah, no, just the one last thing I was going to say on that, and I agree with everything that you just said in regards to Lakin Tomlinson. I think he's one of those guys, like I said earlier, once you make a trade and a guy continues to improve, those are the type of guys you want to keep in your locker room, especially because I don't think his play has fallen off. But the last thing I'll say, just in regards to him too, and this could be because I'm a 49er fan and I've seen a lot of injuries throughout the course of my fandom, and especially throughout the course of this regime. Lakin Tomlinson has played 100% of the snaps the past 3 years. Talk about durability. Not only good level of play, consistent durability as well too. So I can pretty much guarantee he's going to be on the field a minimum of 97% of the downs, and he's also going to give me consistent, possibly Pro Bowl level play every year too. So yeah, he's got to be brought back. I think he's earned it. But the 49ers have to come correct. I don't think we're going to be able to lowball this guy.
You're right. And speaking of the Miami Dolphins, a rumor has kind of been going around about Jimmy Garoppolo potentially being involved with Mike McDaniel. And while I personally don't think Garoppolo goes there, what do you think are some potential landing spots for our quarterback? And what do you think the compensation would be for Garoppolo?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably not going to say anything earth-shattering or groundbreaking, but right. I mean, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Washington Commanders, weird to say that one. I think a sleeper team would be possibly the Carolina Panthers. I don't personally see the fit over there with Tampa. I just don't think that Bruce Arians is the type of coach that's going to bring in a dink and dunk type. If anything, actually, I think he would rather go back to Jameis Winston than bring in Jimmy Garoppolo. I honestly think that they only moved off of Jameis Winston because they had the ability to go to Tom Brady. So, I think, like I said, the Steelers, the Panthers are kind of my dark horse sleeper potential, and the Washington Commanders. I would look at, honestly, the Carson Wentz trade. What happened there? I think that sets up to be something similar. Potentially, possibly a third-round draft pick this year, I think could get it done. I think a third and possibly a player. If he were to go to the Commanders, what I'd like too is potentially like a third-round pick. And if I'm going to take a player, I'd look at Kendall Fuller. I think the Niners can continue to improve our secondary in terms of corners. I think what you should do, I think it's smart to bring in a corner who, I'm not going to say he would. Let me word it like this. I love what I saw from Ambry Thomas this year. And while I like how he played, I don't think that he's just automatically locked up CB2. I think that
Right.
no player should ever feel comfortable, even a Trey Lance. Like, I'd love the 49ers to be able to bring in like a Tyrod Taylor. That's a guy who's not going to unseat Trey Lance, but I think he would push him. He would allow him to continue to show up and continue to work every day. And I think Kendall Fuller is that and more, to be honest. I think Kendall Fuller is a guy who can come in if Emmanuel Mosley is healthy. Emmanuel Mosley, Kendall Fuller, and Ambry Thomas, those three, I think that gives you three solid corners with the potential of Kendall Fuller to potentially overtake Ambry Thomas in terms of potentially CB1 even. I think he has that ability. But at minimum, you're getting three potentially starting caliber corners, the ability to continue to allow Ambry Thomas to improve with those three guys. Depending on what the 49ers do in free agency, depending on what they do in the draft, let's say we go into the season with those three as your three starters. I think what you would do at nickel, you'd possibly, look to bring possibly Emmanuel Mosley would possibly slide in there where Ambry Thomas and Kendall Fuller play on the outside in that scenario. So in my mind, I actually like that. I like the potential of a third round potential pick for Jimmy Garoppolo and a player. For me, that player would be Kendall Fuller if it's the Commanders. If I'm looking over there at Pittsburgh, I'd think possibly a third rounder this year, as well as maybe a conditional second maybe next year as well too, depending on play time. We know with Jimmy Garoppolo, even with Carson Wentz too, one of the things that kind of stunted them was they haven't been able to stay on the field. So if Jimmy Garoppolo plays, you could say 70 to 75% of the snaps this next year, that pick for the following year, that conditional pick could possibly turn to like a second rounder. But if it's like a third this year, a third next year, that's potentially could become a second if he plays 75% of the snaps. I think that's reasonable. I think the last thing I'll say here too is you're only worth what someone's willing to pay for you. So I might sit here and say, oh, Jimmy Garoppolo is not that great. No one's going to make this trade. Well, we know for a fact that there are teams out there that don't want to be left at the altar. And what I mean by that, they don't want to go into the draft season and miss one of these guys who, by all accounts, this quarterback class is considered weak. The potential, we don't know if certain players will be moving in free agency as well too, in regards to trades, whether it be Aaron Rodgers possibly leaving, whether it be Russell Wilson potentially leaving. Kyler Murray's been talked about with the news that's come out over the past couple of days with him removing Cardinals, stuff from his Instagram. In this day and age, that means something. Whatever that message he's saying, I don't know for a fact. I don't know what he's saying, but it sends a message regardless, and people are going to talk about it. There are teams out there. I think the Steelers and the Commanders being the two prime teams at this point in time that wouldn't want to be left at the altar. I could reasonably see Jimmy Garoppolo getting traded for a player and a pick or two picks, while also being the bridge quarterback for potentially a rookie quarterback coming in this year or next year, depending on what teams want to do. That wouldn't shock me, but I want to just be very clear in the fact that a player is worth whatever a team is willing to trade for. And guess what? When you play quarterback position, your value is a little bit higher, even if it's not a great quarterback. I think Jimmy Garoppolo is definitely an average quarterback, which if he's an average quarterback, that still means he's one of the 32 best quarterbacks in the league. He's a guy you can win with. He's not a reason. I don't think he will be always the main reason that you win games with, but you can for sure win games with. And if you feel like the Steelers probably would feel, like the Commanders probably would feel, and like the Panthers probably would feel, if you feel you have a solid defense, a solid to really good defense, and a good to solid offense, you for sure could win games with the Jimmy Garoppolo. My thing is, and this is a whole nother story, I think depending on where he goes, depending on who the coaches are, you're not necessarily going to get this same Garoppolo that we saw this year. I think scheme, the way plays are called also raises his floor and his ceiling. So I think we'll get to see more of the real Jimmy Garoppolo this next year, but fit is everything. And guess what? If he is traded and he's not just outright cut, I wish him the best. I think that he's a quarterback you absolutely can win with. So you're worth whatever someone's willing to trade for you. Even if us as 49ers fans don't necessarily feel, wow, how could he go for a first? How could he go for a second? I don't think that he'll go for a first, but if that happened, I'm going to guarantee that it was a bidding war, and that's why he went for a first.
Yeah, great points, and landing spots especially. I think that those all fit. I also heard about Oakland. I just don't think they move on from Derek Carr because Al Davis, or I think it's Al Davis. No, Mark Davis, I think is
Mark
the owner.
Davis. Yeah.
Yeah. He came out before they hired McDaniel and said whichever coach it is has to kind of be on board with Carr being the franchise quarterback. So I don't think he goes to Oakland. Funny thing is, I don't like there's been a lot of quarterback talk this offseason, but it seems like most of them are going to stay put in terms of Russell Wilson. Yeah, it seems like Russell Wilson likely stay put. It seems like, I mean, Aaron Rodgers is the one kind of wild card. He could go, and if he goes, people are talking about the Denver Broncos because of the potential pairing with Hackett and Devontae Adams if he goes there. But like the teams that you brought up, they're all fairly good suitors for Garoppolo because they all kind of want to do what the 49ers did in 2021. Compete for now, prepare for the future as well. So compensation-wise, I like the deal you had with Kendall Fuller, especially because Fuller has slot nickel flexibility, which is going to be valuable for a guy like Deommodore Lenoir when he's learning to take over the position this offseason. It also gives them flexibility to let go of K'Wan Williams. And so not having to retain him while also having a young piece in Kendall Fuller who you could potentially build around while also potentially being the bridge to a guy like Deommodore Lenoir in the future. I do like that deal because it gives you good draft compensation where the 49ers have hit before with Adam Peters still on the coaching or on the front office. So definitely I think that could be a solid pick. I like
and just to that
idea.
point really quick, just to that point while you're on it. I said that one, and also I posted on Twitter, I think it was last night, just a couple potential value signings, if you will, signings that the Niners will pick. Because as much as I'd like to see them go after J.C. Jackson, I've talked about it multiple times. I've talked with you about it as well too. Yeah. I'd love that, if I'm going to be honest. I'd even love a Stephon Gilmore on a shorter, possible higher average per year type salary, a 2-year. $32 million contract where he's getting paid $16 million, something like that. I'd love that too. But the thing is, as you very clearly laid it out earlier too, and I totally agree, the Niners have shown that they want to build from that defensive line out. And I have no problem with that. Actually, I like that. I like that philosophy. I got no issue with that. But also at the same time, I've had a gripe with them possibly not necessarily valuing the cornerback position the way I had saw it. But I also, in fairness, I think they value it, but I just don't think that they necessarily have always wanted to fix it through free agency, if I will. But if they're going to go into free agency, I can see from a Niners perspective, I can see them going after, and I made this post, potentially, and I know some 49ers fans won't want to hear this, I can see them potentially bringing back Jason Verrett on a 1-year cheap type deal.
100%. I could
see that. He could either potentially play in the slot, depending on how recovery is going, because I know slot's hard to play, especially on knees. I could see him potentially doing that or playing on the outside, but I can also see them looking at guys like Mike Hughes, looking at guys like Desmond King, who have the positional versatility to play in the slot or outside as well too. And it allows you to continue to work and build with Deommodore Lenoir, as you said as well. And even if they sign 1 or 2 of those 3 guys, you still can get somebody in the draft as well too. So I say that from a 49ers perspective, I can see them making that kind of a move. And that's why I also I said the Commanders trade with the pick as well as the player. That seems to me like something the 49ers would do. That sounds more in line with something that they would do. They haven't shown that they're always willing to shoot for the stars with these high-level, top-tier free agents. Now, that doesn't mean that they won't. Maybe they were waiting for a J.C. Jackson to hit the market, which I still think the Patriots will sign him. But if that guy hits free agency, he's going to command a bag as well too. He's going to get paid for sure.
Right.
He's not only, I think he's still kind of slept on. Not only is he a good ball hawking type cornerback, he's led the league in interceptions since 2018 when he came in undrafted. But he's also a good coverage corner as well too. I think he gave up like 650 yards. Yet people are here. We're all lauding Trayvon Diggs for being this great corner who's got the ball. He does have ball hawk skills. Don't get me wrong. He's good. Having 11 interceptions in one season You don't just accidentally do that. But he still has a lot to improve on. He's still susceptible to double moves as well, as Brandon Ayuk very clearly showed him. So having a guy like a J.C. Jackson, who's not only good, that shows ball skills, but he also is great in coverage as well too. Like, that's huge. And I got to be honest, I think that the Patriots probably will bring him back. A lot of people say, the Patriots, they don't like to pay top dollar for these guys. They've shown the ability that they've done that in the past. Now,
yeah,
people don't want to talk about it, but years back, I think it was early 2010s, Tom Brady at one point was the highest paid quarterback in the league because that was going great. And he didn't stay that way. Obviously, the market changes, but Tom Brady has been the highest paid quarterback. Gerard Mayo,
last offseason, Last offseason, they paid guys like Matthew Judon, which people thought was uncharacteristic. They paid like a good amount of
they paid linebackers
money elsewhere. Yeah, they paid linebackers as well. They paid they've shown a willingness to pay when necessary, essentially.
Right. Stephon Gilmore got the most. I think he was the one that got the most guaranteed money when they signed him. When they signed Aqib Talib, I believe he got a higher average per year as well too. So when they're looking for certain guys, especially at the cornerback positions, based on their scheme, they love man type guys, man coverage guys. Right. So when they have a guy like a J.C. Jackson who's really good in man, he's just a good overall cornerback. He can play man, he can play zone really well. So I think he'll be signed. But I wanted to mention those potential value signings, if I may, just because the positional versatility that they bring to this defense. People get hurt through the course of a season, right? So generally speaking, you're probably going to have 2, maybe 3 legitimate starter level corners, and then you're going to have solid depth behind those guys, ideally. But at the same time, if you can get a Desmond King or a Mike Hughes who can play in the slot, play outside, and potentially be return men for you, that sounds like something that 49ers will do. They don't want to just go get a return man who's only going to be a return man. They haven't done that in the past. They want to get a guy, whether it be a back end of the rotation wide receiver, a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 3 who can return kicks, return punts. I mean, they put Ayuk out there. Throughout the last portion of the season, it was Travis Benjamin and Deebo Samuel. Absolutely. So if they can get a guy who's versatile in terms of he provides more than just returnability, I think the 49ers want to do that. So Mike Hughes, a Desmond King, that sounds like picks the 49ers would do. And we haven't even talked about safeties. So that's a whole nother conversation.
Exactly. I mean, you said it perfectly there. The 49ers, they even last offseason, I forget who it was. They had in the Symbol Webster, they had him on the roster.
I was so sad they let him go.
Though. He was a strict returner and it was kind of evident that they'd let him go because the week before, Kyle Shanahan kind of said, I mean, they did bring Jalen Hurd on, but Kyle Shanahan kind of said, if you're a return guy for me, you need to be at least valuable on the offensive end or the defensive end. And December Webster was specifically a special team specialist. And so that's why they brought Travis Benjamin on the team to be their returner rather than December Webster. And so, yeah, you're right in that they value that returner position to be someone who also plays valuable snaps on offense or defense. Desmond King has definitely proven to do that in the past. We've seen the offensive guys like Ayuk and Samuel and Travis Benjamin do that. So it'll be interesting to see if they sign a guy like Desmond King, should they put them back there as well.
Absolutely. And the last thing I'll say there on Desmond King, he actually had a really solid year. And I think he's actually in my opinion, I actually think he's one of the better slot corners in the league. So I mentioned his name, but it's still going to come at a certain price tag too, right? Like I don't think that they're going to break the bank, but if it's a bidding war for him, which very much could happen, I'm hoping it doesn't, but that could happen. He's actually a really solid slot corner. So
you're right.
It could be a bidding war. I'm hoping it's not. I'm kind of hoping this stays quiet and the Niners are able to, pull something off. But I'm not going to sit here and also act like he's not one of the better slot corners in the league. I think he is.
You're right. Totally. And so that kind of covers all we wanted to talk about today. Great offseason episode with you, Jamal. And if you guys want some more, definitely let us know down below. And we'll see if we get a draft episode or draft-related episode out later this month or later close to the draft season. But Jamal, thank you so much for coming on, and I'll catch you next time, man.
Absolutely, man. No problem. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, and more than welcome, or more than interested in coming back on you for a potential draft, a draft pod at some point too. Definitely would want to do that with you guys. It's an exciting part of the season, right?
Definitely. And before you guys leave, down in the description, make sure you follow him on Twitter and make sure you subscribe to Niner Talk with Jasper and Jamal with
Appreciate
a 9.
it.
Yeah.
With the 9. You got it.